My name is Tylluan. I'm a solitary pagan witch, I'm an author and the founder of the Wolf and Howl Press. And so far so good with the dogs, they're all very quiet. They've had their silly half hour after food and they've quietened down a bit now, even young Daisy. Anyhow, I was talking about Lammas in the previous little chat, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about it. How do we celebrate? What do we do? You know, people often think to themselves, oh, well, you know, I need to do something, I need to make something. And what I've noticed cropping up a lot lately are all these recipes for special breads to bake, which is great if you are an experienced baker. But of course, if you're not, making bread can be a little bit nerve-wracking. And I thought I'd share with you a few ideas about this because I used to be a very keen bread baker back in the day. You know, I'd think nothing of using a £3 bag of flour and making all my bread up in one go. Couldn't do it now, but there are ways around it. So let's just talk about this. If you're going to make bread, a special bread for Lammas, and you're not used to making bread, well, the first thing to do is to get yourself a reasonable recipe for it. You are not going to feed an entire troop of neighbours. You don't want to do that. It doesn't matter if it's a nice small loaf. It's quite good enough. You know, when we talk about breaking bread with somebody, it doesn't have to be anything special. It means we're sharing. That's the idea of it. We share something which is precious, which bread always was. Because if you think about it, we take it for granted these days. We can go to the supermarket and we can get a loaf of bread flour off the shelf. But if you think about it, really, all the work that goes into growing the corn or whatever grain it is you're using, growing it, harvesting it, grinding it up into flour, yes, it's a lot of work, not just a bag of flour on the shelf. Anyhow, get yourself a reasonable recipe with about 425 grams of flour in it, or about a pound in weight. That's an ideal amount to work with. Sometimes people say, but I don't know what size I want. That's a good size. It'll go in most bread makers if you do it that way. And I would say just do the dough setting and get the bread out as dough, because you need to be able to work with it. Or failing that, you'll find plenty for making flour into it. Making your bread dough, making it by hand. Now, if you're going to do it, something else you need to think about is that you don't have to use just white flour. And make sure if you do, though, it is white strong flour. Ordinary strong flour will do, but that's what you need for making bread, because there's something in it that makes the dough hold together much better and rise better. And make sure you get yeast that hasn't been in the cupboard for 2 years. Yeast is one thing that will let you down if it's out of date. Really will. It goes out of date quickly. Ingredients are simple. The method of mixing is simple. You can pop it in your bread maker on the dough setting if you've got one, and otherwise you just mix it by hand according to your recipe. If you decide you want to do something a little bit more interesting, I often like adding a bit of rye flour. So what I do is I take, say, a tablespoon or so out of the white flour and add about the same amount of rye flour, because it's got a very distinctive taste. And the reason I like rye is because it grows more easily in colder climates. It ripens quicker. And if you're into the, say, the Romans, well, why not add some spelt flour to your white flour? Keep the same overall amount, but just do, say, half white and half spelt, which was it was a grain that the Romans grew, and they also grew it in this country, in the UK. So it's quite sort of accurate, if you like. So what then? I think the shape often makes a difference. I mean, you can do no end with shapes. Don't stress about it. You know, you see these wonderful harvest loaves with the grains of wheat and the mouse running up them. I've made those and they take forever. And if you're not used to bread making, don't even attempt it on your first go. You can do a couple of other things. One of them is to make a nice little blob like a bun in the middle, and to mix the rest of it into sausage shapes. And then you attach the sausage shapes to the bread and you just wind them round so it looks almost like the sun's rays, and you've got these little circles. You don't need to bake it terribly long. You put it in a hot oven, very hot oven, and say give it about oh, I don't know, normally a loaf of bread would be about 20-25 minutes. Maybe try it at 15. Turn it over and see if it sounds hollow when you tap it. And you can't miss it when it sounds hollow. And then another one is to make a nice plain loaf of bread and to get some food colouring and a very clean, preferably new paintbrush. Because, believe it or not, once your bread is baked, as long as you're going to eat it quickly afterwards, you can paint on it with food colouring. So you can paint bunches of grapes or whatever it is you fancy, because you can mix food colours like paints, you know, you can mix blue and red and make it purple. And it's very, very effective. And, I hope it adds to your feeling that you're sharing, that you're making something special. And the other thing that's very good about doing a little bit of bread for this festival, because it's not a fire festival, unlike, say, Beltane or the Midsummer Litha, it never was really a fire festival. So one of the nice things about making it is you can share, and that's really lovely. You get the sense, I'm going to cut my bread up, I'm going to share it, pull it apart, doesn't matter. And those little ideas will make a very special loaf out of really a very basic recipe, which is what you want. Next year, perhaps you can go on and try much more complicated loaves. But if you've never done it before, give it a go because it's great, and do have fun with it. And I'll be back in a minute with a few more ideas. So aren't you getting a lot for your money this week? Well, not for your money, but you know what I mean. For your time. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.